This is our first official meeting of 2019. Hope we all had a good break, and I know Council has been working very hard behind the scenes in between the end of last year and now, and I thank you all for your great work you do out and about in our community. Council, before I do a welcome, I will acknowledge our acting CE, Andre, today, and I welcome you, Andre, in the job you're doing in Terry's absence, and also to May, acting on behalf of Kylie and Dave. Apologise, Dave. All acting in as council does when people are away on leave or for personal reasons, that we've got good staff to fill in. So I do welcome them to our meeting today, and I know that council will deal with you with the utmost respect of your position. Councillors, I open our meeting with our prayer. We give thanks for the contribution by pioneers, early settlers, and for those who fought in the various wars for the fabric of Tetterville community we have today. Councillors, I also add our thoughts and prayers for our local people, as far as Tabulam and to our north, who have been affected by our recent bushfires, and our thoughts and prayers also with them today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be accepted in thy sight, O Lord. Amen. The acknowledgement of country, I would like to acknowledge traditional custodians of this land that we're meeting on today. I'd also like to pay respect to elders both past and present of the Yuckabull, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. Councillors, we have no apologies. I'm sorry. Our CE apology for Mr. Terry Dodds. Can I move in a second there, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Bronwyn Petrie. All in favour? Again, carried. Thank you. Disclosures and declarations of interest, councillors. I have disclosure in the confidential part of our meeting with COM 2/19 with the lease of 132 Manor Street. It is less than significant, non-pecuniary, and I'll be staying in the meeting. Can I have a move in a second to accept that disclosure, please? Councillor Sawyer, I thank you. Councillor Rogan, and I thank you for second. All in favour? Against? Carried. Confirmation of the previous minutes. Councillors, we have two. Are you happy to do them? We had an extraordinary meeting in our last meeting in December. Are you happy to do them together as one? Would someone who was in attendance at that meeting like to move that they are a true and correct record of the proceedings of that meeting? Councillor Sawyer, I thank you for moving, and Councillor Tom Peters, I thank you for seconding. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Tabling of documents, councillors. We have no tabling of documents. We do have a urgent late summary items of business, and it's the addendum, councillors, to do with the a couple of Merrill minutes I have, which I'll deal with in the Merrill minute. They're item MM1/19 and item MM2/19. Can I have a mover to accept those late items? Councillor Verry, I thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Rogan, I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, we do have three speakers to do with our public access session. And to do with item NM2/19, a notice of motion brought forward by Councillor Verry, up sustainability of the woody vegetation. And councillors, our first speaker to speak on the to do with the vegetation to do with that item is Mr. Bob South. Would you please stand and welcome Mr. South to our chamber, please? Come forward, Bob. Don't think it's special for you, Bob. We do it all the time. Thank you, Bob, and welcome. Mr. South, you do have 5 minutes. When we get to 4 minutes, we'll give you a 1 minute warning.
That'll be okay. I'll try and get through it quicker than that. I'll be brief. Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors and staff members and members of the public for allowing me an opportunity to actually comment on this. For a start, I have put on each of the councillors' desk a sheet of paper. It's actually just it's actually in the form of a comment to the Chief Executive Officers of the Ian Potter Foundation and the Myer Foundation. That was in response to, as part of the irrigation organisation, we got a request from them for to put forward any sort of areas that needed research in the freshwater system for them to run. So this was put forward on behalf of the Mullen Sovereign Water Users as a research project that we thought was relevant. Now, what I would like, if you could, if you pass that motion Gary's, of Councillor Vary, sorry, if you pass that motion, if you could endorse this policy, as long as you don't have no objections to it, to give it some extra support. It's fairly important to get extra support because we have put proposals forward for research to be done from the irrigation industry. The farmers have done it. They seem to have a vested interest and they just seem to get lost in the system. So if we could sort of get some independent support, so if you could actually endorse the proposal we've put forward or the comment that we've put forward, I'd much appreciate that. I'm not going to go into now the pros and cons of trees and their value on the rivers and there. I think everybody's got their own opinions of that, and we could talk for many hours on that one. So it's not point. What I want to say is a couple of things. If the information on the report that was Councillor Vary's thing applies in Australia as well as it does overseas, and if it does, probably the biggest risk to Tenterfield's water supply is an increase in riparian and other vegetation in the catchment. On the satellite imagery, there is not a lot of vegetation on the river, but I am not on the creek above the dam, but I am not familiar with that area of the Shire, so I can't comment on what is there, but there is a potential, and there's probably the biggest potential threat to Tenterfield's water supply into the future. So I'd just sort of like to draw your attention to that. And what this motion does, and what I want to say, all it is asking for in this is for research to be done into the problem. There is a huge gap in the information, and these debates are basically emotional and political. And when we get emotional and political debates, you do not get a factual, common sense result in most cases. So there is a great lack of information, and all this motion is asking for is that research be done. And I'd like to sort of just endorse that, because there is a need for more information, more research, and this information is relevant to Tenterfield Council here. Get that information. If it does reveal there is a threat to Tenterfield water supply, you can then see what the threat is. It can be managed. You can, once you know what they are. So I think it's extremely important to just have the research done. And I think everybody is aware of and has their own opinion on these things. And I can't see why there can be any objection to this, because it is only asking for research. It's asking for the facts. It's not asking that trees be removed. It's not asking we reduce any of the timber or any of those things. It is asking for research for the facts. So I'd like you to keep that in mind, and I don't think there's any need to say any more. I mean, the motion speaks for itself. I congratulate Gary on the excellent report that came with it, with the information in that. It was extremely good, and thank you very much again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. South, and thank you for your comments. Very good. Councillors, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jeff Robinson. Mr. Robinson's also speaking of the notice of motion to do with respect to the fauna. Mr. Robinson, if you'd like to come forward, and councillors, please stand and welcome Mr. Robinson to our chamber. Welcome, Mr. Robinson, and once again, you have 5 minutes, and we'll give you a 1 minute call.
I'll just start off with a brief apology. I got caught in a Lovegrass fire with the Homestead Brigade a week and a half ago, and I had a bad asthmatic episode from that. I ended up in hospital, and I haven't recovered yet, so I'm a bit throaty, and I haven't been sleeping.
Take your time.
To talk about the loss of fauna in the Bundaberg area, and that's my only area of expertise. I've been very interested in environmental aspects of Bundaberg since I bought the block in 1971. We didn't have fires in those days because all the cockies burnt all their country every year. We had softer grasses, native grasses. Now all we have as a result of the first National Park fire. They acquired the land, most of it out there, in 1976. And since then we've had wildfires in 1983 when we formed the Bunaboo Brigade, because we thought that was going to be our future. Fires regularly, as it has proved true. We had a big one again in 1994 when the Tenterfield community responded in a way I've never seen. 200 people turned up one night to do a back burn along the Mount Lindsay Road, and we stopped it. They came out with tractors and wet bags and God knows what. It was just a fantastic effort, and it was all coordinated by Jimmy Landers, who was on the local radio and at the fire centre. We had another big one in 2002, which just about ruined my life. It burnt us out. We saved the house and just about nothing else. I finished replacing the fences about 6 months ago, and now they've all gone again. I've lost about 18k of 4, 5 and 6 barb fences completely. The day the fire came over our place, my wife, who's about to turn 80, was on the roof with a hose, and I was rushing around putting out spot fires. And I don't think we can handle it again. I'm bloody sure we can't. Excuse the language. But I'm to talk about the fauna. In 1996, I worked for the National Parks for 4 months, building those bitumen tracks, walking tracks in Bunaboo and in Balrock National Parks. And I met Peter Croft, who's a bit of a naturalist with the parks. He has strong ideas about fire, that fire every 15 years is good, and I've always maintained that fire every year in that dry sclerophyll forest is necessary to maintain native grasses and stop invasive species. The park is now just pure bloody grass and hickory wattle, which burns fiercely. Talking to Peter Croft, I mentioned that we had 5 breeding pairs of black glossy cockatoos. The 2002, and I've been written up in the paper. I have a camping ground on my place. I have a photo here. I don't charge for it. I've had up to 70 people staying for 10 days. The Queensland naturalist. They found a lot. They found a species that was thought to be extinct, and they did a thorough research of the whole Tenterfield area. They had meals in town. They visited lots of properties from the Mole to the Mystery Face or wherever it was. I only stick to Bunaboo. So it was a worthwhile, and a lot of those people keep coming back to the area. In talking to Peter Croft...
1 minute, Mr. Robinson.
Right, after the 2002 fire, I've only had 1 pair of black glossy cockatoos, and I think this fire now would have ended them because they only feed on the casuarinas, and the casuarinas, after a fire, they burn very hot, and they only produce seed after 15 years. So I think with the other birds that I had that were fairly unique and attracted people to the area, I think they're all gone. They would have to be all gone. The other thing is, a couple of months ago, we had a fellow talking about koalas. He gave a talk out at Sunnyside Hall. I attended there, and generally the demise in koala populations is put down to overclearing and urbanisation and all that sort of thing. He admitted to me that where they had the big bushfires in koala country in Victoria 15 years ago, and the country, it crowned right through and it was totally destroyed. There hasn't been a koala spotted since those fires in those areas. And if people are concerned about koala populations in Australia, they ought to be looking at protecting from wildfire.
Sadly, Mr. Robinson, that is a bit over 5 minutes.
Thank you, Peter.
But thank you very, very much. Right. Before you go, Mr. Robinson, I do want to comment on some of your comments and fully support, because and where I'm coming from is that I'm not shifting away from it. That once the dust settles on this event, let's call it, that we are asking for a big debrief to do with everyone that's involved. to do with how we can go forward from this to make it better. And I know people say you're wasting time, and I don't care. We will still continue on because we know we've got huge issues. This motion is very supportive of that, and I know it's right across this country, but we'll be driving it from here, and I'm happy to have you involved in that on that day. But thank you. Just one. Just one. Microphone, councillor.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. I was just wondering, given your history of and bird watching knowledge, how many species of birds are you aware of in your property or local area?
148.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, councillor.
That's excuse me, I've just got a load of hay being delivered.
Yeah, you're right. I was going to invite you to hang around for Smoko, but if you're a busy man. Thank you, mate. All the best, Jeff. Councillors, to do with our last speaker this morning in a public access, Ms. Lana Takia, speaking against the motion with respect to stream flows in water. Would you please stand and welcome Lana? Thank you, councillors. Lana, as the previous speakers, you do have 5 minutes, and we'll give you a call when you've got 1 minute left.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I do know it is going to go a little bit longer.
No, it won't. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think this is a pretty important issue.
Yep.
Globally. Okay. I'm Lana Tayak, and I'm just going to go quickly into what I want to talk about.
Yep.
I need to read this as well, though.
Yep, it's fine.
Okay. So our Earth is running a fever. Okay. We're getting hotter and hotter. We are continuing to drive from here on forward unless we make changes to our current practices. I've been lucky to do a lot of study that is not the norm and have found maybe some other solutions that aren't current practice. Immediate action is necessary to save humanity, and that is very, very serious, and we're in a really dire situation right now. If we go back in time to early settlement, the whole area teemed with native animals and birds, so think of the fertility that created. The creek was filled with water and had long, deep water holes. There's not many long, deep water holes at the moment. The land was covered with, I can't read that, I'm sorry. Okay, canopy trees. So we've taken out a lot of trees as well. Yep. Okay, wildlife numbers. This was just from 1 month alone, a culling of wallabies and bandicoots and other animals. It just shows the numbers that were originally here, and again, coming back to the fertility, the biological cycles of the land. And next one. You can see how high the creek used to be to the banks and the willows on the banks. Yep. Okay, so what has changed? The loss of trees, the wildlife decline, the animal movement is very restricted now with fencing, so there's a lot of land not being fertilised, not being cycled, those nutrients aren't cycling. The soil's ability to function and absorb water due to compaction and altered biology, draining of the landscape and directing it away as fast as possible through drains and biodiversity. Okay, so there's drains everywhere, globally, all over the planet. Next one. Oh, did you see the numbers there? 70,000 cubic kilometres of water globally has gone to the ocean, and it doesn't come back. Okay, next one. We started draining the water when there was no longer a capability of the soil to absorb it. Due to soil compaction occurs with disturbance. Disturbance is harmful to microorganisms. Without fully functioning soil food web, the soil can no longer function and infiltrate water. So that's where everything started changing, and we started getting rid of the water. It could no longer go in and keep our land moist. Compaction leads to the inability for water to infiltrate and sets the stage for weedy species to grow, and lovegrass loves these conditions. So drainage has increased the velocity, lowered the water table, reduced underground reserves, incised the creeks and riverbanks, demanded excessive irrigation to crops, created droughts and increased fire hazards. Soil compaction doesn't allow for water to penetrate past compaction point and therefore does not recharge the water table from compacted areas. Adding life back into the soil by putting the microorganisms back into the soil, we restore its functionability. So once we put that in, the soil can open, we can then put water in. Yep. We can do this simply and efficiently.
1 minute, Lana.
Restoring the life in the soil, implementing water harvesting system to the landscape to slow, spread and sink water. Yep. Green waste, meaning compost from our green waste from the community, can be used for ecosystem repair to replace those microorganisms that are missing. This is all scientific based as well. Our green waste can help. Yep, next. The soil food web is what is contained in that. They're the microorganisms. That is the only thing that makes soil function correctly. Yep, as nature intended. After you've made the compost, you make a tea, which has the organisms. You can put it out on a boom spray. Boom spray, yep. Aerial spray, yep. Okay, then we start getting deep root function, okay, like we should. Yep, next. $150,000 a year this farmer has saved in the past year, yep. And he got 10 grazings instead of 2, yep.
Lana, what I'll do, I'll offer you now, because your 5 minutes is up. Please respect what I'm going to do. With your PowerPoint, I'm sure the councillors, if they're interested, that we can get a copy of that. Yeah? Yep. I'll give you a little bit longer just to verbally, just to wrap up what you're speaking on.
Okay, well, this is just the beginning of then putting in what structures, what can be implemented, what earthworks can take place to slow water down, take it out to our dry ridges instead of rushing down the gullies, sinking water, lifting the water table, and having continuously flowing creeks with very clean water. I'll just point out one thing here. This is where we were, okay, succession roads like this. When you make a disturbance, whether it be tree removal, tillage, whatever, as we come back further in succession, we sit here. We're in a mainly bacterial dominated soil. This is where weeds and lotgrass grow. This is where compaction is, and all the other organisms are not there to make soil function.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, that's our rules and regulations. We do give you 5 minutes, and whether you're speaking for or against, I need to be fair to all speakers. I invite you to, if you've got the time, to hang around for morning tea, and I'm sure that councillors would love to have a conversation with you. But thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Lana's, Ms. Tyke's PowerPoint,
Yep.
that go to Nolene and then come to all of us, rather than having to go individually. Yep, thank you.
Yep. No problems at all. Thanks, Mel. Councillors, we move on to the Merrill minutes, councillors, and it has been approved that with these addendum items, I have item MM1/19 to do with the Jennings Wallingarra Ordinary Council meeting and the change. That decision was made for obvious reasons, councillors, and I'll put to you the recommendation, and I will. I don't need to as mayor, but I always do is ask for a second for this. Thank you, Councillor Sawyer. Happy for any questions, councillors? All good? All happy to receive and note? Against? Carried. Thank you. The second one, councillors, is item MM2/19 to do with the Tenterfield bushfires. And it's just a brief. It's more for everyone's information. It goes from the start right to where we are now. Councillors, and once again, I will ask for a seconder here, please. Councillor Mike Petrie, I thank you. Happy for any brief discussion or questions to do with this report, councillors. I do commend the staff who helped compile this report and with the wonderful work they've done.
I'd just like to thank the staff and all the volunteers. I think they've done a wonderful job.
Yep. Thank you, councillor. Noted. Okay, I put the Merrill minute. Councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried. I thank you. Councillors, recommendations for the items to be considered confidential. We have We have items COM/19, item CO3, I'll start that again, COM2/19, COM3/19, EC01/19, EC02/19, EC03/19. Can I have a move and a seconder with a recommendation that we deal with these in confidential session, please? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, I thank you. Seconded by Councillor Verry, and I thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we start with in our business paper with your hard copy on page 29 with our open council reports. This is to do with our community. Councillors, we're dealing with item COM1/19. Can I have a move and a seconder so we can deal with this item, please? Councillor Sawyer, I thank you, and seconded by Councillor Rogan, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our Chief Corporate Officer to deal with this item. Thank you, Tamay.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll hand over to Erica Bursford, who's our Manager of Customer Service, Governance and Records, to present this report.
Thank you, Erica, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, Mr Mayor, the petition that was lodged with Council in January is described before you in the report. It was submitted by two school-age boys in Tenterfield who queried how would they get a petition going to upgrade the skate park that they have been using since the school holidays started before Christmas. And to do them justice, we explained how petitions work. And by the end of that day, they had generated what is a legitimate petition with the required number of signatures, requesting that council consider improvements and upgrades to the skate park. So we have recommended that council notes that there has been this request in the form of a petition, and also that council consider this request to upgrade the facility as part of the operational planning process, which is taking place over March and April, and which will be presented to council as part of the operational plan proposals. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Erica. Councillors, questions to either Tamay or Erica to do with this? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I was just wondering, the plans, in order to plan the improvements that the youth would like to see, do they have a sketch of how they'd like that to fit in that area? Or if this goes ahead, do we need to engage someone who basically designs skate parks all over the place?
Question.
So through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor, we would expect to engage with the petitioners, so we would advise them of council's decisions today, and then the relevant section managers and supervisors would make contact with the lead petitioners, and they also then inform the others. We engage with any petitioners that are involved in this type of approach to council, so similar to petitions that were presented last year around developer contribution plans, where we're engaging now with those petitioners in the same way they will be engaged with in terms of, well, how do they expect or want this to look like? And that will be part of that development process.
Thank you, Erica. Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm in support of the recommendation, but I would ask that either point 2 be added to or create a point 3 to say that this recommendation with 1 and 2 is subject to grant funding becoming available, so that there is no impact on Tenterfield Shire Council's 4-year financial plan.
Yep.
The reason for that is that I can see the need for the youth. We had a live-in skate park expert for 6 months last year when the grandson was staying with us, and in his language, our skate park sucked.
Yeah.
But he's used to North Shore in Sydney with extensive things. So I think we need a improvement on what we have, but not a grand scale. And if we can get some grant funding to fund it so that the ratepayers' needs are met and the financial need of the ratepayers is met. And I think by adding that extra bit either to 2 or including it as 3, I think that gets the petitioners' plan off the ground and started, and the needs of making sure we're financially sensible in what we do is met as well.
Yep. Councillor, I'll just leave that to sit there and fully supportive of that add-on. I'll come back and we'll do that as an amendment. So you flagged it, and because there's some other councillors wish to ask some questions, and councillor, out of respect, we'll come back to you. We'll deal with that then. Councillor Rogan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is not a question to Erica, but it's a more of a proposal to the rest of the chamber. The skate park has come up on the radar previously, and not that long ago, when that list was made up for the community improvement thing.
Yep.
And it was deleted at the time, I believe, but it was on there originally. So I know I've shown some interest in it. I've had a query from a member of the public about improvements down there. Councillor Sawyer has as well, I believe. So I think if, obviously we've noted this petition, and if it gets to the stage where an investigation by staff is being done regards the improvements that are needed, therefore there would be costings have to be sorted out, and some sort of budgetary consideration be given, whether it's through grants or whatever, but costing would have to be done. And I'd like to see improvements included, not just to the actual item itself, but to the amenity of the area around there, such as seating and shade and that sort of stuff for parents and people who supervise children. I was down there yesterday and had a look at it after I read this, and there's been some structure either broken away or removed from the top of the ramp, so there's a dangerous situation there at the moment. So I'm just wondering how often staff actually check on it. There are brackets and bolts sticking up out of the top of the ramp. So I think it's been neglected for a while, Mr. Mayor, and I think any improvement would be beneficial. Obviously, the local youth think so.
Yep.
And improvements to help adults supervise down there, such as seating and shade and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And that's fairly common in other parks. I mean, Stanthorpe's got a park like that. That's all I'd like to say. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Verry, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wondered if we've got any ballpark figure of what the cost would be, and I'd like to put a flagged amendment to Councillor Sawyer's amendment that we include the villages of Urbanville and Drake into that, because that was one of the first things Urbanville tried to do when I got on the council. They wanted to try and get a skate park there for the kids. They tried to put a grant application in themselves.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that, yes.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that, Councillor, with government funding we've got to do with the villages, actually. Well, we'll deal with it when we go back to the amendment. Councillors, any more questions to our officers to do with the report? Question, Councillor? Yeah.
Just following on from what Councillor Rogan said about the current dangerous situation.
Yep.
I would presume as a result there will be an urgent inspection.
Yep.
Can I also request that with those defects, that it's not simply barricaded and it's actually fixed straight away, unlike, I mean, I had an issue recently that something needed fixed. Instead of fixing it, it was barricaded and closed off. So I would actually and the worst thing that could happen is actually barricaded and I will fix it one day and then the kids have got nothing to use. So if we could have that assurance from staff, please.
Fair question, Councillor, and I'll go to our CEO for some comment there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Look, just to pick up on Bronwyn's point, or Councillor Bronwyn's point, when we've got infrastructure that whose condition changes over time, right, and something might well be vandalised. Actually, if you go to the monthly operational report, there's quite a bit of extra input that's been put in there this time pertaining to parks and gardens, and you'll see that the manager of that area has actually, highlighted the extent of vandalism that's prevailing in certain places, and just the extent of some infrastructure that the council just physically cannot get to. So, and they've gone to the trouble of actually highlighting how probably less than 50% of their time is actually doing what they're primarily there for, and that's to maintain our green space, our parks and gardens. So they're being their attention's being diverted. So what I'm flagging with you is whatever we do, it's always subject to resourcing issues. That's number one. Number two is that whatever we do, when we do inspections and the matters are brought to our attention like this, is yes, we'll go out and have someone do an inspection and just note what the extent of the risk is. If something can be fixed promptly, yes, it will be fixed promptly. But if we can't get to it promptly, what the right and proper thing is to do is to mitigate the risk so that, you know, it's not a liability to ourselves or the community. And that might well be just putting a bit of barricade, taping around or whatever. You've got to, if you know that something's a problem and you do nothing about it, you're culpable, right? Now, that's why you'll see at times barricades put up and the like. So that's why that occurs, right? So I would suspect to you that when inspections are done around the place, that things will come to people's attention. We will chase that up. But just the other question that Bob actually raised, Bob Rogan, a moment ago pertaining to costs, right? I was in my very first council, and this is going back, shivers, 9 years ago now, and this was in Victoria, where they had to put in a half pipe, right? Not as salubrious as what you've got there, right? And that the capex cost on that was somewhere around $180,000, the build, right? So just you need to keep a measure of perspective here. That's why I think it's wise what Councillor Greg Sawyer has put up there, subject to grant funding at the end of the day. Yes, we all want more facilities. But at the end of the day, those facilities cost, and that cost has to reflect into your long-term financial plan and your operational plan, or I should say your delivery plan. So I'm fully supportive of more things, providing we can get the money and we're sustainable financially going forward.
Thank you, Mr Acting CEO, for that. And Councillor Rogan, I do thank you. And just on that, I'm sure that you've raised those points. Could be wear and tear, yes, and could be a safety issue. So those things will be, as our Acting CEO said, will be inspected by our staff, and I'm sure that will be dealt with ASAP because you've raised that. Councillors, before I go back to Councillor Sawyer for your amendment, I do commend the youth of our area for bringing this forward, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Fully supportive of us trying to do something. I need to talk to Councillor Sawyer's grandson to find out what a 3-foot spine and a 4-foot, 5-foot quarter and mini bowl and a half pipe. It interests me, all that stuff. So anyway, but we'll get there. Councillor Sawyer, I'll deal with your amendment now. The amendment's there and I haven't called for a second yet, but as simple as that, 1 and 2 and subject to grant funding coming available is...
Subject to grant funding becoming available so that there is no detrimental impact on the Tenterfield Shire Council 4-year financial plan.
Yep. And I'm happy to pursue that, Councillor, and I do commend you for the add-on with our federal and state member to do with that.
Yep.
Because as we all know, at different times through the year, there's all sorts of funding available. So I do that. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Tom Peters, thank you. Councillor Sawyer, did you want to speak to the amendment?
No, I've spoken enough. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Peters, as a seconder? Did you want to speak to the amendment? Okay. Any other comment to do with the amendment, councillors? Yeah, we'll take Councillor Bronwyn.
Should this become successful, I would hope that in your negotiations with the federal and state government that you actually include some representatives from this group.
Yep. Yep. That's a very good point, Councillor. I thank you for that. Councillor Vera, I do apologise because you did want to add to this. What I was going to say with our villages, do you think it's something, and I know it's sort of the list is getting longer, but to do with our that funding we got through the state government fixing country communities, you know, with the money for the hall, is that the right label for that? Stronger country communities. With our villages, is that something we should try and pursue in there if that interest is still there, Councillor?
Well, I think,
I'm not taking away from what you want to do here by any means.
Yeah, I think the interest would still be there, but I don't know what we've got in mind for that fixing country communities on top of our head for those 2 villages.
Yep.
I'm sure we've got some beautification work, but whether this would fit into there or not, I don't know how much even a basic skate park would cost.
Yep.
I think we should pursue it either way.
Okay. So in fairness to you, Councillor, you have flagged, did you want to try and add that into this, to this amendment to do with our villages?
I think it probably should be a separate amendment.
Okay.
That we actually look for money for those 2 villages. I don't think Drake's got a skate park, has it?
No.
No. So I think we should look for money for those as a separate issue, not to confuse us with Councillor Sawyer's.
Okay. Yep. But in this recommendation, or a totally different one day?
Not in Councillor Sawyer's, but as another Dock Point.
To do with this item?
Yeah, Dock
Okay.
Point 4.
Okay, I accept that, councillor. So you're moving to this amendment? The grant money, well, you need to work with Nolene here so we get a wording right. The grant money is sought for building of skate parks in Drake and Urbanville?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for the advice, Nolene, always accepted. I'll deal with the First Amendment. I have the mover spoke and the seconder has spoke. There's no other comment. We'll move the first one. It'll go in as number 3. Is that correct? Yep. All in favour? Against? Carried? No, thank you. Councillor Verry, we'll deal with your amendment now. That grant money be sought for building of skate park in Drake and at Urbanville villages. Simple as that. Councillor, it has a seconder. Councillor Bronwyn Petrie, do you want to speak to the amendment? Okay, Councillor Bronwyn, did you want to speak to it? Okay, councillors, I'll put the other one in. It'll go in as number 4. Yes? All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Now I'll move the whole recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And I will add, councillors, and I have flagged with the which is relevant because of that petition and of our youth. I've flagged with our high school principal that in the early part of this year that we do form a youth council. And I've yet to get back to her to start that rolling. I think it'll be absolutely fantastic. I see this sort of stuff being fitted in there, that the youth of our area have a voice, and that they'll be listened to. So I think that's something, Councillor Peter, with your comments to do with you being involved with this. So I think that's important. Okay, we move on to page 39. Your hard copy, councillors, is item ENV1/19. Water dispensing station at Urbanville. Can I have a move in the seconder here, please? Councillor Verry, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Sawyer, and I thank you. And I hand over to the Chief Operating Officer to present this report. Yeah. Okay. Well, isn't that you? Mr. Mate. What are you?
Okay. I'm acting CEO.
Sorry, no. I'm sorry, no. Okay. Righto.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
By all
Chair.
means.
I'll take this one because I know the background and probably is not as well briefed on this. So, look, councillors, what the situation is that we've been having, with the drought, as you know, there's been increasing demand from our rural ratepayers, coming and seeking potable water from time to time. We're certainly seeing plenty of that in Tenterfield to do with its water dispensing station that we have here. We're also receiving inquiry up around the northern part of our shire. Now, whilst we're trying to deal with the northern part of the shire in a temporary capacity at this point in time, certainly the temporary arrangement is certainly it's not a long-term solution. It ties up our people's time, and I think we've just got to, I believe we've got to look forward and just recognise that certainly what we're dealing with in the last couple of years, I'd be very surprised if that's a random situation. And, we seem to have, people keep talking about climate change, they keep talking about extreme weather events and cycles, but for the community, they need water and they need access to it. So what this report's about is about putting a long-term solution in place in our shire, right? So that's why the recommendation is as it is, to basically pay for the installation at council's full cost. That's not to say, though, if you want to, there hasn't been any discussion, might I say, with Kyogle as yet about them possibly contributing, and whether they would like to contribute or not. We haven't had the luxury of time to have that conversation, but if that's something that you would like us to do, hey, that can be flagged as an amendment. But at the end of the day, I certainly believe that this is needed, and I commend the report to you. Happy to take questions.
Before I go to the councillors, Mr. Acting CE, what are we with the recommendation on page 40 with our numbers 1 to 4? Are we to choose one of those? Is that what we're asking here, or is these things that are just going to be in the makeup of what happens? Just for clarity alone.
Yep. So look, the items 1 to 4 on page 40 was part of the officer's consideration of what the possibilities might be. So if you were looking at, with any business business decision, you know, you look at options, right? And this is effectively a listing of what the officer saw as the options. Continue business as usual, do nothing, right? So you'd have no cost. It would be a case of, thanks for your suggestion, you know, staff, but hey, look, we don't want to be a part of this. So that's that one. Installing a water dispensing station. Well, that's really what this option's about. It's saying, let's put in a long-term solution. The other couple of options are effectively install it, but, you know, seek some sort of funding contribution from elsewhere. So that's what that's about. So, look, it's really your call at the end of the day as to whether you accept effectively that point 2 as the way forward, or whether you want us to go that next step and have some discussions. And if those discussions fall fruitless, then we revert back to the item 2 where we pay for it in full.
Before I go to you, Councillor Sawyer, and it's only for clarity, councillors, for those councillors, and you all should be aware, the Kyogle Shire, they buy the water off us from the treatment plant at Urbanville, which was replaced with a brand new treatment plant some years ago. One of the better things council done. And we supply water to the town of Woodinbong and the Aboriginal settlement of Woodinbong. Kyogle pay us for that water, so that's so you're all aware of that, and I think you all are. So just for some clarity alone, Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favour of the officer's recommendation, with the proviso that we pick up option 4 and add it in as point 3 in the recommendation, so that not often, but can happen, that resolutions are passed on the intent that something's going to be done, but that minute detail gets missed. I think option 4 is a key component of this overall recommendation, so I believe it should be picked up, the whole wording in option 4, and dropped into the recommendation as point 3.
Councillor Very, and once again, Councillor, we'll come back and tidy that up. I'll just go to other councillors. Councillor Very.
Mr. Mayor, I'm totally against item dot point number 4. I prefer number 2. Do it immediately, and then we're in Urbanville, because there's no point in us. There's no benefit to any businesses in Urbanville. If we build one in Woodinbong, we should be building in Urbanville, where our businesses, where the tourist buses, etc., can fill up there later on, and it may benefit our businesses in that particular part of the Shire. And then we enter into some negotiation with the Kyogle to see if they want it, or either to look for grant funding.
Okay. Before I go back to Councillor Sawyer, just you hold that, because obviously I need to. Councillor Sawyer has flagged that this is what he wants to do, and obviously it'll be voted on as an amendment. So, is there any other questions or speakers? Councillor Bronwyn, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, does Councillor Sawyer mean that we put the, we pay for a dispensing station, but we put it in Woodinbong rather than Urbanville, or did he mean that we put one in Urbanville and we asked Kyogle to put an additional one in Woodinbong? And my second question was to Councillor Berger. We'll just deal with that one first, just for clarity of the comment.
No, that's fine, Councillor. Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to have 3 and 4 included as one item at item 3 under the recommendation, so that we pick up both Urbanville and Woodinbong. And as long as we get Kyogle involved in the discussion to get the best outcome, I don't care whether you pick up both of them. So,
Fair point. Any other questions? I'll come back to you, Councillor Bronwyn Petrie. Councillor Rogan, yes? Question to do with the report.
Yeah, just I've got a question on the bottom couple of paragraphs there where it says, this is page 40. Recommended that council purchase a new water dispensing station. And the next paragraph talks about an interim a standpipe arrangement with a metering arrangement. So we're talking about putting in an interim solution straight away before we put in a proper dispensing station, and if so, why? That's the question.
Acting CEO will reply, Councillor.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rogan, the situation is that we're getting those ongoing requests up there. People are saying, where can we get water? And so we're dealing with that right now. And yes, there is an interim solution in place right now, and that interim solution is effectively a need, a significant need, right? one of our operators will go out, they'll take, basically set themselves up over a hydrant plug and a meter, right? And they will just couple into the tank and fill the water tanker, right? But that service is only being provided, as I understand it, to a couple of water carters at this point in time. The feedback that we're getting is that there are any number of people that don't necessarily want to go and be dealing with water carters, who might have to come from Casino, wherever they might have to come from, and the water costs are very, very significant because they're having to pay for a lot of transportation. So you've got people that might want to come in and just pick up a couple of, like you see what they carry around on the back of their four-wheel drives, right? Just a couple of cubic metres of water. Now, if they had a facility that they could do that, I mean, that's what people are doing right now up at our water dispenser in Tenterfield. I see them when I go down to the depot. So right now we have an interim solution, but it's only just, it's like just helping a few people, right? Whereas the longer term solution will help many people.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Partly, yeah. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Andre. I do understand that now, but I guess therefore my real question is, if it was resolved today to agree to put in a dispensing station, what's the sort of time frame involved before that would be operational?
Question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, my estimation is that probably at least 4 months, right, based on from what I'm, what it took last time. With delays in sort of, pouring concrete pads, delays in getting the equipment delivered, then connecting up that electrically. Look, it was a bit of a teeth pulling exercise the last time. It took quite a time to get that organised. I think if I had to put a number on it, I'd be saying that sort of time frame.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Peters. Yep.
When you say a standpipe, you mean?
Yeah.
When you say a standpipe, you mean filling trucks?
Pods.
Those 1,000 litre things, whatever.
Yeah, but also, if a caravan pulls up and wants to fill his tank, you don't want to be putting a standpipe that's capable of filling a 20,000 litre truck into a caravan, so you must have to have two of them, or you can turn them down or something.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I can just to reiterate what I said. The temporary arrangement right now is that the operator will go out, they will set up over a hydrant plug, and they will have a meter, and then there'll be a coupling straight into that. There's not physically a standpipe as you would know it, where somebody just comes along, unlocks a lock, turns the cock, and sort of basically lets the flow go straight into the top of the water cart or couples onto that. There's not the sort of thing that we had out at the old, we had an old dispenser out at Tenterfield there at one stage, and it was an overhead arrangement, right? Well, I'm not talking about something like that. What we have right now is very much just the operator goes out, makes a connection, that connection connects to the water cart, the amount of water is measured through a flow meter, and then once that's done, he uncouples, takes it away. So.
Okay. The questions, I just need to tidy some up. Councillor Verry, with your comments, with Councillor Sawyer's response there, is that tidied that up with what he said?
Not really. I think item 2 or dot point 2 is probably the best item for our shire.
Right.
Whereas if you start engaging with Kyogle Council, they can build one anytime they like in Woodinbong.
Yep.
We've got no say in what they do in Woodinbong, and I'd prefer for us not to build one in Woodinbong. I mean, Kyogle.
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Bronwyn, you had some questions for some clarity. I'm just trying to tidy this up so we're all moving forward here. Councillor Bronwyn.
Yeah. So
your questions to Councillor Verry?
For clarity.
Yes.
Item 2, as Andre explained earlier, is our motion that we are considering.
Yep.
So we're not picking between 1, 2, 3 and 4. What we are looking at is item 2, which is now the officer's recommendation.
Yep.
Is everyone on board with that?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So, I'm supportive that we do that in there. As Councillor Verry said, we can't make Kyogle do anything, but we could certainly encourage them if they wish to put a pipe in at Woodinbong using the water that we supply anyway. That's up to them. I'm just wondering about the current quality of water. I thought there was an issue up there recently. And also, further from what Councillor Rogan said about the pursuing a temporary stand pipe arrangement to fill in this next 4 months. Is there any progress on obtaining one of those temporary hard stands or stands?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I have had some discussions with my water manager. This is going back a good number of weeks now, just about effectively putting in some sort of a hard stand. Instead of us doing this temporary arrangement of having the operator come out each and every time and go away, which, look, it's not going to be very convenient, but if you set up a temporary stand pipe, right, with a meter on it, with a lock, and then that is managed through the Progress Association or some voluntary crowd that we can, have a discussion with, then that's a possibility, right? But dare I say, look, that is doable. We don't necessarily have to have a concrete area. I think that one needs to be explored a little bit more, and to the extent that, that I don't think the need's going away. So it might well be that we do explore that a little bit more and expand on what we're doing to try and get a temporary stand pipe in place and engage with the Progress Association. But certainly for the long term, that's what this report's about. The long term, what are we going to do for the long term? And so the recommendation is about the long term.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Okay. Councillor Sawyer, I go to you now. So we've got clarity here for you. We're dealing with it as an amendment. So, well, option 4 becomes option 3. So that's what you'd like to move.
Option 3 and 4. Option 2, as we all understood, is the recommendation.
Yes.
In the interest of getting something done in conjunction with Kyogle, I originally talked about 4, but on rereading option 3, I think we can get the whole thing done with 3 and 4 added together as point 3 under the recommendation.
Yep.
That doesn't prevent us getting on with the job at Urbanville, but we can at the same time, as that's getting planned and getting ready to be done, discuss with Kyogle whether they want to come on board. That's all I'm trying to achieve.
Yep. Okay. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Tom Peters. Okay. I'll come to you in a minute. We'll need to get all this right. A bit of a tidy up. In the officer's recommendation, approves purchase of a custom water dispensing station. Should we mention Urbanville in there?
I believe so.
So I don't need a motion. We're all happy with that? So we're all clear about what we're talking about? Okay. I'm dealing with an amendment. Councillor Sawyer did with the wording. Is that as simple as it needs to be, or?
The fact that we commenced discussions with Kyogle Shire to enhance the recommendation with their involvement and adding Wollongong at their cost.
Yep.
Not at ours.
Which supports your question, Councillor Berry. Just don't reply just yet. I'm dealing with that as you to speak towards the amendment, Councillor. Councillor Peters, you're the seconder of the amendment. You wish to speak?
No, I'm pretty right. I think, I think it's a pretty fair sort of a motion. I quite agree with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're dealing with the amendment. Questions to the mover of the amendment? Yep, Councillor Bronwyn. Okay. And I'll come back to you, Councillor Berry.
The consideration of 3 and 4. 3 is that Kyogle partly fund the installation at Urbanville.
To hold the conversation with them, yes.
Yep. And 4 is that they, at their own cost, put a dispensing station at Wollongong.
Yep.
So are we chasing both? Because if they're going to put one at Wollongong and also partly fund the one in Urbanville, because that's of no use to them at all if they're meantime they're going to put one in Wollongong. So is it more that we liaise with Kyogle Council for either contributing to the Urbanville dispensing station or constructing their own dispensing station at Wollongong? Is that the crux of what Councillor Sawyer?
I'll go to our acting CE for some answers there, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Berry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What I'm hearing, councillors, is that we want to have a discussion, or the council wants its officers to have a discussion with Kyogle to confirm their willingness or otherwise to contribute to having a water dispensing facility up there. I did preface my opening remarks that hasn't happened as yet. And look, I honestly believe that perhaps we, rather than sort of just copy in word and paste, just cut and paste item 3 in there, that we just, there's that second sentence, enter into discussions with Kyogle to see their level of willingness to jointly fund the project at Urbanville. And in the event of there being no willingness, council fully fund the Urbanville CapEx. So that places the obligation upon us to go and have a talk. If we can get some contributory funding, good and well, because of the benefit. But at the end of the day, it's giving the officer a way forward to get on with the job.
Councillors, be aware, and I thank you, Andre, for your comments, that our staff, they do not vote or tell us what to do. They are here for advice and help anywhere. I do thank you, Andre, for that. To do with this amendment, Councillor Sawyer and Councillor Peters, you're happy to add that in there? Councillor Peters? Thank you, Andre, for those comments. How are we going? We're getting closer? I think we're there. Councillor Rogan, yes, we'll take.
Sorry, just throw the cat among the pigeons again. I just think, sorry, that's unnecessary. I mean, the motion is to install number 2, right? So we put a water dispensing station in at Urbanville, which is funded by Tenterfield Shire. If you go down to motion 4, you can also enter into discussions with Kyogle to see if they want to do the same at Woodenbong. So I think we should join 2 and 4, not 3 and 4.
Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, if I can just, I suppose, sum up, those 4 items were potential options. So to get water up in that locality, one option might have been to simply not do anything at Urbanville and have a water dispensing station at Woodenbong, which really is, your item 4 at the end of the day. Enter into discussions with Kyogle, see if they will install a water station at Woodenbong. So I personally can't see any sense in having a water station at Woodenbong and Urbanville, right? So, but instead of having one at Urbanville, they could have one at Kyogle's. Really what we're saying is see if Kyogle will wear the cost and, our locality benefits by having the amenity of that facility. So, look, there hasn't been a discussion with Kyogle as yet, but to sort of go down the path of item 4 really is just forestalling the inevitable. That doesn't take away the need, it doesn't deal with the need.
And being with the closeness of those towns, there's only 11 kilometres between them. I mean, fully supportive of the comments from the councillors here today that we are approving the 40,000. We want to see one built in Urbanville. Wouldn't want to come up there, they can come. If Kyogle want to build one there, well, it's up to them. That's the way I see it. Councillor Brom, a question to do with what we're talking about? Right.
We're going cross purpose. On one hand, we're saying we'd talk to Kyogle about putting one in Woodenbong, but then as you said, it's 11 k's apart, so there's really no point.
Yep.
So, and on the other hand, if we put that in there, if Kyogle aren't willing to fully fund it, we're going to pay it anyway. If I was Kyogle Council, I'll say, you beaut. We'll just say no, because Tenterfield's already agreed to fund it. So is it, at the end of the day, do we as councillors want to have a dispensing station in Urbanville in our shire that we're paying for?
Yes.
In which case, that's what's here, providing we add those words, custom water dispensing station in Urbanville, in that recommendation 1. We have to add those words, add Urbanville. If we are seeking some funding from Kyogle to assist us in doing that, then isn't it simply, instead of joining all these different things, isn't it simply liaise with Kyogle Council for regarding contribution to the installation of Urbanville water dispensing station? Full stop.
Yep.
Well, can I put that up as an amendment, please?
Well, is that going to fit in with that amendment we're dealing with? That one there?
Well, it'll override it. I mean, at the end of the day, do you want this, the question is, do councillors here want this dispensing station in Woodenbong, in which that brings into play number 4? Or do we want it in Urbanville, as Councillor Very said, which is our larger village, where we have a lot of tourists, etc., etc., etc. Do we want them in Urbanville, or do we want those visitors going to Woodenbong? I mean, that is the end of the day. Do we as councillors want to have the original officer's recommendation, which is to purchase a customer water dispensing station, either at Urbanville or Wollongong, or do we want it now in Urbanville? That's the first question we have to ask ourselves. The second question is, if we decide it is Urbanville, do we then wish to liaise with Kyogle Council if they're willing to contribute to it, because that will assist their people
That's
not
right.
having to go to
That's
Kyogle
correct.
or Casino?
That's correct.
Or in fact, and in those conversations, they might even say, oh, well, if you've got one there, we might even put a small one at Wollongong. And they might say, well, if you've got one at Urbanville, our people won't, we'll just shuffle enough to Urbanville. So at the end of the day, if we want it in Urbanville, we put those words at Urbanville in part 1, get rid of all the 3s and 4s and simply add point 3, which is liaise with Kyogle Council regarding contribution to the installation of the Urbanville water dispensing station, full stop. That's my take on it anyway.
Okay. That's exactly what Councillor Brumman's saying, right? Yep. Because we haven't given it away. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Brumman, I'm going to take that and accept that as a second amendment. We're going to deal with the First Amendment. Okay.
Mr Mayor, as Councillor Petrie's amendment
Yep.
meets my intent,
Yep.
I'm withdrawing my amendment
Okay.
with the approval of my seconder.
Okay. You happy with that, Councillor Peters? Thank you, both councillors. Councillor Brumman, we need some wording for this amendment.
Liaise with Kyogle Council regarding contribution to the installation of the Urbanville water dispensing station.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bob Rogan, thank you. Councillor Petrie, just check your wording up there and you're happy with the wording?
Have you spelled it?
Councillor Brumman being the mover of the amendment, do you wish to speak to the amendment? Okay. Councillor Rogan being the seconder, do you wish to speak to the amendment? Okay. Councillors, I'll put the amendment. All in favour? Against? Amendment's carried. So the officer's recommendation is there with that amendment included. There's been some changes. Thank you for the discussion, councillors. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Councillors, we'll do one more and we might break for Smargo. You happy with that? So on page 42, it's item ENV 2/19 to do with the summary of drought relief program derived from the Merrill Minute item NM 5/18 drought relief potable water access. Can I have a move and a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Rogan, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mike Petrie, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to our Chief Operating Officer to present this report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, the only introduction that I would have to this report is that there has been significant changes to what has been happening in our Shire, certainly the last couple of months, but you're not necessarily going to read that in a 4-year delivery program comments out on the right-hand side. Where you're going to see the changes is more in the comment about emerging risks and what council staff are doing in that space. So, look, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about funds coming into the Shire, whether you're talking about the fires, whether you're talking about parks and gardens, what's happening in that space. Look, there's certainly activity going on, significant activity and progress being made. So I think enough said other than to commend the report to you and be open for question.
Questions to Andre to deal with this report? I'll take you, Councillor Very, then you, Councillor Rogan.
Andre, you've got one water cart and 51 loads. I just wonder if you've got any figures for the second water carter at all as yet?
I can comment there. I can comment to Councillor, which I was going to anyway. Be aware that Henry's been outstanding. Colgrane's been the main carter. Now we have, because of the workload there, we have another carter doing it and helping with this is potable water. And reason he's only been signed on the last couple of weeks. So I would say that's why that information as far as what he's done and is there, because he's only been there 2 or 3 weeks, Gary. But it's working really, really well. the quantity of water. Well, I'm defending him that why that information isn't there because he's only just started.
I just wondered if we had any up-to-date
No,
figures, that's
we
all.
don't have it. Yeah. Councillor Rogan, I'll go to you, Councillor McNish.
Thank you. Still on the subject of water cutters, a couple of weeks ago, there was I know there was an issue where water trucks were carting water out of there out of our standpipe to Blueview Hill, the construction workers. I just want to know whether that's been stopped or it's still continuing. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, my understanding, and I'd have to talk to my water services, right, but my understanding that there was a meeting with the representatives of the contractor as to their needs and equally to let them know our needs, right? And where that was last left, and I think this may well be a month old, this news that I'm telling you now, is that certainly they were carting water at one stage for basically just for construction purposes, for construction water, and that was definitely knocked on the head. At this point in time, if they have carting water out there, my understanding was it was for running of the camp, like just for potable purposes, right? It's not for sort of making concrete on site or anything like that. So I know I've made comment in the past to my water systems manager, and if it's the mind of council that we shouldn't be providing any water out of that, to that project, that rather they should be sourcing it from Glen Innes or wherever that has better supply. We could certainly push that line, but my understanding for construction purposes, it's definitely been knocked on the head for some time.
Thank you, Andre. Councillor McNish, you've indicated.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just on that water carting, that second truck carries 16,000 litres. Yep. It's a body truck. It's not quite as big as Cole Graham's, but can go places where Coles can't.
Yep.
I'd just like to ask, Andre, how do you define a farmer that's eligible for drought relief assistance?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, if you're asking me how the politicians define it,
I'm asking how we define it.
How we define it.
Now, the reason I'm asking this is because I know of people with 2 acres and 1 bloody horse who are getting free potable water. And I'm speaking as a farmer who's been carting water every day for 10 weeks and paying for it and being abused by other farmers up there who want to get it for free, but they can't. And I said, what's the council doing? I said, all we can. But I said, user pays. And then I hear about these other people with 1 or 2 acres getting free water. So that's what I'd like to know. How do you define a farmer? Eligible farmer.
Look, through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the eligibility and the definitions, that's really something that I haven't had anything to do with. What I can say when it comes to, as you know, there's been $25,000 that council allocated as part of the federal government's $1 million drought assistance recovery money. And that was towards providing water, potable water to farming communities that were affected by drought, or farmers that were affected by drought. So my understanding was that money was there to be used to pay purely for the water. But the actual assessment was something that was done by the salvos. If there was a need, they'd go to the salvos, they'd have a talk to the salvos about their circumstances, and then it would flow from there. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't have the precise detail, Councillor.
Just on the Salvation Army thing, I think council itself should do it, because I didn't worry about it, but apparently you've got to ring Sydney, go for the press button A, press button B, press.
Council with the salvos?
Yeah.
No.
Well, as I've been told.
Oh, well.
But why couldn't it have been done through the council? Why does it have to be outsourced to a religious organisation?
Council, that I don't think, with respect, that's not fair. I think the salvos have done an outstanding job, and they're a community organisation. And they have been solid all the way through. I take on board your comments, and they're with merit and fair questions, councillor. But as far as the who gets it and who doesn't, it's been totally through a local Salvation Army, and I'm not aware of anyone that had to ring Sydney or anything. Anyone that I know that's been delivered locally has dealt directly with Joel, and that's how it's gone. So who should get it and who doesn't? It's had nothing to do with it. It's a program, I thought, and going back to our Mingoola meeting last year when council took that fee off, it's been very well received in the community, and it's something that we've been working along with for some time now.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not knocking the Salvation Army, don't get me wrong there.
Okay.
But the number is an 02, I think it's eight something number, which is definitely not a local number.
Well, I do know that through many conversations with Joel that he's dealt with a lot of this stuff personally. So that's all. And I'm not saying I'm right or you're wrong, but I take it on board. Councillor Petrie, Bronwyn Petrie, you have a question or comment to make on this report?
Just following from what Councillor McNish says, when we did put this through, it was agreed at the time that the Salvation Army would determine, would take the inquiries.
Yes.
And because they would pay for the freighting part of it via that money that was administered through them. But there is an issue in that a lot of local farmers say, well, we don't want to go and be taking money from starving kids. And I have to tell them, well, this is specific, isolated drought money for farmers. But the issue that Councillor McNish said is quite correct. It needs to, we need to make sure it is bona fide farmers that are genuine primary producers, that have a PIC number, and that have a primary producer declaration. Or the other thing that I had suggested a while ago, and I know council staff were pursuing it, was an alternate water pipe for the farming, for the water for stock. Because at the moment you can go and buy water for stock and it comes out of the dam, which is actually effectively the dam. Now, as we all know, the dam is only a quarter of the catchment of Tenterfield Creek. The other 3/4 comes in from the rest of it. And I know there was discussion with Water New South Wales, etc., to see where and how we could do that so that we're not, cows and sheep and horses don't necessarily want filtered water. But so there's an opportunity for livestock water purchase to come from another source within the creek where there was sufficient of a water hole, etc. And I'm not sure where that's progressed to, but that would certainly help farmers who do come in with their pods, etc., etc. But we do need to double check with Salvation Army that it is only going to bona fide people, that it is going to primary producers with a PIC number or a primary producer deck. But as I do know, some farmers are reluctant to avail themselves of that because they think they're taking money from someone else. And maybe it is time to bring that to council.
Just some response to do with the question to do with the stock water and where we're at with that, Councillor Bronwyn. I'll ask Andre and I'll go to you, Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, pertaining to stock water, Councillor, you're quite right. There are locations along Tenterfield Creek that, you know, we know Tenterfield Creek's not flowing, but there are locations where there are pools of water, if you would call them that, or decent holes that could be pumped from. There was some inquiry made through a number of government organisations just as to whether council could get some sort of licence to effectively set up a standpipe and basically make available water free to you know, any of its landowners that needed stock water. The feedback that we had was that, look, this is not something that really council should be doing as such. At the end of the day, if there's a licence to be granted, right, it should be something that's provided to each and every person that wants to do that sort of process. There's nothing to stop, and there's what was recommended was that the community, if a landowner wanted to basically get a water cart and throw a you know, I mean, let's face it, a lot of the water carts these days, any RMS water cart I've ever seen has got a pump on the back and a hose, and you just throw the hose at the suction point into the creek, wherever you so wish to pull from, and you suck straight into the water cart. Now, if a community member, or I should say a landholder, wants to do that, you just need to get a licence to do that. Now, that shouldn't be a voluminous process. We did check that out, and that is the recommended way forward right now. In terms of whether, you know, that's a long-term proposition or not is another thing. I have made comment in the past that certainly our backup bore, right, because of its saline levels, is very soon going to become a source for stock water, right? It's not going to be pumping straight into the Tenterfield Dam because it's of such a standard that we wouldn't be treating it on its own as potable water.
Thank you. Does that answer the question, councillor?
No, because knowing, and I note Councillor Peters' reaction, it is not that easy to get a licence to go and just pump out of the creek. Part of the trouble is a lot of the local landowners, as you know, they're actually worse off than 1965, where there was 10 mils more rain, but through the year, but 6.5 inches of that, 165 of that mils of that came in December. So they actually had water in the dams and water in the river. And I can walk across Tenterfield Creek behind our house. So a lot of farmers actually don't have water that they could then go and suck out to sell to someone else or give to someone else or go through the trying to get a licence to do so. The idea was, because that dam is way less than what people think it is because of the silt in the bottom, and that's going to become an issue for actual towns, for people to drink, the idea was to find an alternate place instead of taking it from there to provide for stock not having to come from that town dam, which is reducing daily as you drive past it. So I'll make inquiries elsewhere to see what can be done, but I'm going to say there's very limited ability for any landowner in the area to have water trucks come and take water from there, but I know there were other areas available in town.
Andre's got some other comment, and then I will come to you, Councillor Peters, and I apologise.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Brolman, one thing I omitted to mention before was that as part of our, I suppose, due diligence follow-up of this issue of stock water, we did ask about getting another bore in place, and I was led to believe that we did have a bore licence on another bore up around Apex Park. It's basically an old bore that's been capped at this point in time. We're not sure of what the yield of that bore would be, but I've given the okay to my water services manager to put a pump down there to get some sort of an overhead stand in place, and as soon as we have done that, there's probably no reason why we cannot provide that as a source at this point in time, and it's something we can do now, as opposed to sort of going through the process of trying to source another bore and all the licensing and the time lag associated with that. So sorry about the.
Councillor Peters, and then we'll wrap it up, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're carting water 24 hours a day to grow the tomatoes, right, out of Denham. And I think we're taking 20,000 litres, in a truck, 2 trucks, 24 hours a day. And it's costing a fortune, but it's coming out of a big mine hole over there. So, it's an exorbitant cost, but there's no water anywhere else, so we've got to do it and they're doing the same over the border. Everyone's carting water at the moment, and you try and get an irrigation licence under about 4 years, you'll be extremely lucky. All the red tape and rubbish you've got to go through, it's absolutely ridiculous. You can't even dig a hole in the creek without a licence now. It's just stupid. I've been through all that, been prosecuted and Christ knows what else. It's just plain stupid. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillors, I will wrap it up. The officers, sorry, I apologise, Councillor Miss, I missed you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
No, you're right.
Just a quick comment. I forget when it was, but when I was first on council, we did the bore at Shirley Park and the bore at Apex Park at the same time. For some reason, the word radioactive comes to mind, that the bore out there was unsuitable to pump into the Tenterfield Dam. So if unsuitable for that, it's probably unsuitable for stock water as well.
We'll find that out, Councillor, but thank you.
Just one last comment. Look, in terms of the suitability of the water, right, any groundwater is going to have a measure of mineralisation, and the degree to which it's suitable for potable purposes is a function of that mineral content. When we go and I know from other places that I've worked where I've had bores put in, you've got to test for, the level of uranium or, radioactivity. You've got to test for arsenic. There's a whole lot of things there, but certainly it was no good. I understand Apex was no good for potable purposes, but that said, it's coming from the same sort of ground system that you've got down at Shirley Park, right? And the feedback that we had down there was that it was okay. Right, we just know that its saline levels are a bit more elevated than what we'd otherwise like to process it through a water treatment plant. So look, what we'll be doing is setting the facility up. We'll certainly be getting some water tests done, but in the meantime, for anybody that wants water, they'll be taking it at their own risk, and I'll be preparing a basic indemnity form that people sign. If they want it, they take it at their risk. Council cannot guarantee the quality of it at this point in time, and it'll be up to people if they want to take it. Like, you know, that, like I said, it's at their risk.
Okay, councillors, the report's here to receive a note. Just to comment before, we are in a time, councillors, that we're working really hard. We, as in this council, us as councillors need to be very supportive of our staff, and I fully appreciate and respect the depth of conversation we have when we're dealing with water. We will come out the other end of this, and councillors doing all they can to protect the water, especially in our dam that we have, and it is potable water, to source and be supportive of any other form that we can get, especially for stock water to do with the bores, and I know we'll get there. So I just need to share that with you. The officer's recommendations there, councillors, to receive a note. All in favour? Against? Carried. Confirmation to suspend standing orders, please. Councillor Peters and seconded by Councillor Verry. All in favour? Against? Carried. Righto, we'll break for Smogo. So I remembered.
You did?
Yeah.
You didn't even have to. You didn't even have to.
We're reminded.
Don't worry, you've got Noeline on your left, you've got Andre on your right, you're going to tap one way.
All of information.
Just two.